Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Sarah Dolan, a computer engineering student at the University of Montana. Sarah was recently featured in The Mountain in My Mind, a film discussing mental health experiences to spread awareness about suicide prevention. Sarah shared a personal incident revolving around sexual assault. Today, we will talk about how to respectfully approach sexual assault as a topic of discussion and how to create a comfortable discussion atmosphere. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today on Hopeful Conversations.
I'm very glad to be here. It's nice to meet you and be helping out with Robbie's Hope.
Thank you. Can you tell us generally about your experience with sexual assault?
Yeah, so it would be a year and a half ago where I was assaulted and I fell into kind of a deep hole after that, and it was tough to get out of, but the number one thing that helped was therapy and friends. And I didn't learn this until later on, but talking about my incident and hearing what my friends and my peers and people I wouldn't normally talk to had similar incidents, and making the conversation is extremely important and what helped me get through a lot of my hardest times.
Was your initial reaction to turn inside and not talk about it?
It was. So when sexual assault first happens, I think the first reaction is generally to deny what's happening. And that's what happened to me. I didn't understand what happened to me. And it took talking to a friend who led me in the right direction for help. And so that was really amazing that I did get that help. I think a lot of people will just push it under the rug until it comes up later and they realize, like, oh, this happened to me, and it's too late to get the scan and push charges or do anything among the legal matters. But so I did go with that track, but after I did that, I didn't talk about it for a very long time, and it does get isolating. I moved into a house with 6 girls, and I think I only told them what happened about maybe 2 months into the living situation, and it felt like I was keeping this big secret, and it was hard for me that they didn't know. And once they did know, it felt kind of this pressure off my shoulders. But even once I told them, like, we didn't talk about it that often, but it felt good that they knew what was going on with me.
You could be more true to each other, and they could be there for you.
Yeah, and they were supportive, and conversations came up, and it was a very positive step in the right direction at that time.
When you say help, so you're a college student, what does help generally look like for someone who has been sexually assaulted, maybe on a college campus?
So here at MSU, there is the Voice Center, and most colleges have the Voice Center. I don't know if it's called the Voice Center everywhere. That's an important thing to know. And they have a hotline where people are available at all times. And so I was told to call them, and so I did. And they were helpful and directly set me up with a therapist or somebody who gave me a little bit of extra help, because they're just volunteers on that hotline if you need help, and they're extremely helpful and put you where you need to be. So when I called them, they sent me to a therapist, and she told me, you should probably go to the ER and get it's what's called the rape kit there and get checked. If I wanted to push charges, I had to make that step within 24 hours.
Okay, that's helpful. You feel like there's a stigma behind discussing sexual assault?
There absolutely is. I'd say the number one feeling that I've heard across the board, and personally I felt, is embarrassment, because it feels like I did it to myself. Like, I put myself in a situation. And that's never true. It's never going to be my fault for the pain that happened to me. That was not on me, and it took me a long time to learn that. And I can be told that by my therapist and my friends, but it really just takes time to fully understand that that wasn't my fault.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay. What can we do as a society to help take those stigmas away, to have these discussions?
Yeah, so I think conversations are great, and probably the hardest part about that is starting that conversation. For the most part, I would say I don't actually start that conversation. I'm not the one initializing and saying, this is my story, this is what happened. So that's why I was so glad to have that platform I'm out in my mind to talk about it, because I don't that often. So when I do talk about it, it's normally around friends that open up to me and tell me what happens, and then I can let them know what helped me, what I went through, and it's this feeling of like, oh, this happens to other people, like it's not just me. And so that's a lot of times victim to victim, but I think it's also very important to share these stories among people who haven't been through this, because like how I went through with my roommates, like I wanted them to know, but I couldn't start that conversation, like just asking questions like one-on-one, like how are you doing, like, and that could lead to something more. That's what happens. Like I was living with this girl in Spain, and she was just having a tough day, and I asked her like, oh, what's going on, and it just led to being able, it opened up a safe place for her to tell me what was going on. And we were able to talk about it and really connected on a deep level. And it was honestly a very special moment that I was glad to have with her and help her out. So,
does she have a similar shared experience?
Yes. Yeah.
Often that's what connects us. So those friends, those roommates, those people in your circles, Mountain on My Mind, community, other college students that don't have a shared experience, how do we create more of a comfortable space where we can be comfortable having more difficult, vulnerable conversations?
Yeah, I think it's important to have, and it's different for everybody, but I think in my case, I want to talk about it more than I do. So if someone were to come up to me and tell me like, what's one of the hardest things you've been through, I would tell them my story. And I don't really know that many situations where this would just come up in normal conversation or where I would need to, but I think they are important to have, like on podcasts like this or with friends, like saying what you've been through. I think it's very important for friendships to share like deep things that's happened, or between roommates or people that you're just around a lot, to know them better. And it just creates like a really deep connection and a safe place. Like my friend that I called that day was someone that I trusted very much, because we've shared deep conversations before. So I had someone to go to. And so I think having a friend or people that you can talk to is super important.
Yeah. Taking things deeper, it's so amazing what happens when we maybe take that mask off, or just being able to be vulnerable with one another in a sensitive way. Listening. What kind of language should be avoided when discussing sexual assault experiences?
Yeah, one word that you've probably noticed I haven't said a lot is rape. I do not like using that word. It feels triggering. I think sexual assault is appropriate in this case, because there's varying levels of assault as well. And so everybody's experiences are different, but I think it affects everybody in the same way that it happens to, male or female too. I think that's the very important thing to say as well. Is
there any other words to avoid or correct words to use?
I think asking people first, like, what are triggering things for you? It's going to be different, but you can say your trauma, your experience. It might sound a little too lighthearted for the matter, but your sexual assault, you're just saying assault. Those are words that I respond well to.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I guess as a loss survivor, I work really hard, and as an advocate for mental health in general and suicide prevention, I work really hard to use the right language, and language can be so triggering. Like I work at the beginning, the word committed really bothered me. And I would just like shut down if somebody said that my son committed suicide. I like to use the word that my son died by suicide. I feel like the word commit has the connotation of a crime, of a sin, and I don't believe that a person that dies by suicide has committed a sin or committed a crime. And at the beginning of my grief journey and of my loss, I would get spiraled really fast and just shut down when someone used the word commit. And now I feel like I'm able to extend a little more grace and just like if I can correct the person in a sensitive way to them. Most people don't try to use the wrong language. It happens. It's kind of our culture, but just education for each other is so important. So you mentioning that to avoid the word rape, take away from this conversation for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's similar, but it feels like this dark looming cloud that's so bad, and it's hard to imagine that like that happened to me because there's so much negative connotation with that word that it almost hurts to hear it and have it talked about.
Yeah, and you're on a journey. This was just a year and a half ago. That's not that long ago. And now is it a before and an after for you?
No, and I'll share this. Like normally I don't think about on the daily like I did at first. It was extremely overwhelming, and I wouldn't have a day go by where I felt like I was hiding something from my friend, or that I felt super lonely, or that I didn't feel connected to my body at all. But now it's not that way. It really just takes time. But like yesterday, there was a club fair at Montana State University, and I was just stopping by, and the Voice Center was there, and I started talking to them, and I just got this wave of anxiety, and so it's not instantly you're better one day. Like something can pop up, like what happened for me yesterday, and I just had to step out. I know my breathing techniques. I know how to ground myself. Those are two very important things to learn in any kind of situation. And so I just stepped out, collected myself, called someone that I knew would help me out. And I felt fine and was able to carry on with my day.
That was exactly my next question. What can be triggering for a sexual assault victim or somebody that has experienced sexual assault? Do you like that is not the right word to use at all? I'm going to correct myself, stop myself right there. Victim, I don't know how that sits with you, but.
I think victim is appropriate. One of the stickers that I picked up yesterday is survivor.
Just certain things like triggering. I bet there's, I know for me, for my loss, there can be, for my trauma, triggers that aren't even related to like Robbie, to the way Robbie died. I mean, I have triggers about the drinking glasses in our house. Like I don't want to replace them and it's kind of heavy for me. It feels kind of silly 4 years later, but I'm like, my son used those water glasses. We're keeping them. And my husband has very, very different things that I would say we could label as a trigger. So I'm just wondering if there's more things that we can do to support individuals who have experienced sexual assault so that we don't trigger them?
Yeah, I mean, triggers come up wherever. Like, one of my reoccurring ones is this one very specific song that plays, and this would be, I think, September or October, like just a couple of months after I was assaulted, and I was at a bonfire and this song came on, and I asked, "Oh, can we skip this song?" just lightheartedly. No one knew what happened to me, and my friend goes, "Oh, haha, is it triggering for you? Having no idea what happened." And I just remember shutting down and having to leave because, like, I just was not expecting that at all, and she has no idea. And that's okay. I don't blame her, but in a situation like that, you never know when someone can get triggered. So if they bring something up like this, just say like, "Oh, for sure, yeah." Like, respect someone's wishes is great.
I bet that was an uncomfortable situation for you.
Yeah.
It's hard. Some of the language that we use just on a daily basis, like that I'm depressed versus I have depression. I'm anxious. I don't have anxiety. Triggered. Like, that is a common, like, we hear it every day. That triggered me. Well, I mean, it has so many different meanings to it.
Yeah.
Is there something that people don't get right or misinterpret when it comes to the experience of sexual assault?
I think the biggest thing is the varying levels. I know people who will say, "Oh, I don't think I was sexually assaulted," because maybe they were kissed when they didn't want to be kissed, but that's still sexual assault, and that can still really affect someone. And I think this word is appropriate right now, but I think even when some people get raped, they don't even realize it wasn't consensual or realize the extreme of their situation because they think they weren't injured or it wasn't violent. And rape isn't just violence, it's unwanted sexual contact or anything that makes you uncomfortable when you didn't ask for it. Consent is extremely important. Like, it really comes down to if you consented or not.
Yeah, I had to look up to prepare for today because I will tell you that I'm not super versed in this topic. I think it's really, really important, but that sexual assault was defined as unwanted sexual contact and lack of consent was the biggest determining factor.
Yeah.
How does like alcohol or a substance kind of fall into that for someone that is of age? I would imagine it could blur the picture a bit.
It does. I think that's the most common scenario in college as well, is someone will be intoxicated and wake up the next morning and realize what happened. And it is blurry, and I think that's what makes it so much more confusing to the victim, because generally you made that choice to drink. So I think that's where personally people can feel like they're in the wrong when that's not the case at all. Like, you're in college, it's what happens, and what other people do is their choice, not yours.
Yeah, that's super good information, reminder. It's hard. So oftentimes I read that sexual assault can lead to depression, PTSD, anxiety, and a propensity to re-victimize. How does that sit with you?
With me, I think I fell into a couple of those categories. Number one was anxiety. I developed feeling very anxious all the time, and
social anxiety or like more universal anxiety?
It was social anxiety. Like, when I met new people, I did not want to be meeting new people. It was scary. Like the first time I went out, just like talking to the cash register lady, I was like, oh, I don't want to be here right now. And I didn't feel that before that. And so it was kind of shocking to have those new feelings of anxiety that I hadn't before. And
I bet.
And,
scary.
Yeah. And also, I kind of went into a destructive cycle. And I'm mentioning this because a couple of people that I talked to actually went through the same thing. Like not treating myself well. Looking back, I think it was a depressive state that I was in, like of self-sabotage. And so I was not treating myself well. I wasn't letting other people treat me well. And I don't know why that is or where that comes from, but it seems to be a very common thing that's happening after victims experience something traumatizing like this. I think, well, if I were to put it into words, it'd be something like I just got a lot of my rights violated and a lot of my control taken away, all of my control taken away. And so I think that echoed deep inside of me that I didn't deserve to be treated well. I didn't deserve for people to look at me and just not disrespect me.
It sounds like there was a period of time, I'm not a professional counselor in any regard, but like you internalized what had happened.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
What were you able to do are you in a better place now, a year and a half later?
Yeah, I am in a much better place.
What have you been able to do for yourself to get you to where you are today versus where you were after the incident?
I talked about this a little bit in Mountain in My Mind, and it's a lot of the premise of the film, but skiing made me feel better, and it wasn't just skiing, it was climbing, it was all these outdoor activities that made me feel better. My mom had always told me about forest bathing, and I think it comes from Japan maybe, and it's about going out into the trees and just therapizing yourself in nature.
Repeat what the meaning, the word?
Called forest bathing.
Okay.
Yeah. So just doing things outside was something that helped me a lot. I think those physical activities outside connected me back to my body. And I was like, I am strong. I can get up this mountain, ski this thing. Those are very important to me.
I see you light up when you talk about skiing. Most people are only going to listen to this podcast, but I can see a different smile and a different, just look on your face. That's awesome.
Yeah. And another huge thing that brought me out of that hole was I met my current boyfriend, and he's an amazing human and has also been through trauma. And I think we were able to relate on that. And I got out of that state of mind, and he made me feel very special. So I got lucky. I know other people who it took a year to get out of this state. So I'm very grateful for him.
Yeah, a lot of work.
I wish I could say I did it by myself, but I didn't.
You have other people to thank.
Yes.
And other people to still call on today, because this isn't over. Do you think it's over?
No. It's not over. A pivotal moment for me was actually, I was just having a general checkup at the doctor's office, and the doctor was asking if I'd had any hospital visits, and I was just like, no, carrying on. And then at the end, I was like, well, actually, I did. I had to go to the ER for when I was sexually assaulted. And she's like, no, that's huge. You have to, I'm very glad you told me about that. And we just started talking, and she said it just takes time. And I was like, oh, it's another person telling me how I'm going to get better. But then she opened up and said, personally, I know, it's just going to take time. And I was like, oh, wow, she's been through it, and she's okay, and she's a doctor and an amazing human. Like that was a very special moment for me. I don't
It was
think
helpful
it was that, because I was just like, she's an adult, completely functional, doing amazing, super happy. It's going to take time. And that was like one of the most honest pieces of feedback I got. And it came true. It takes time.
Good. I feel like that's like, we use the saying, like, time heals all things. And I don't know, when my mind state is not in a good place, I hate it when people say stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
you have no idea what my loss is, and you have but I don't know. I've been able to sit with people who have a new trauma, a new loss of suicide. And I'm grateful that I do have the gift of time, and time does help, but also doing the work helps. Like, we have to do the work. Doesn't just go away because a year and a half passed or because 4 years passed. I do the work. I do the work to take care of myself.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that. One of the very first things that I did was get a therapist, and it was my first time having a therapist, and it was really helpful. So glad I did.
Can you explain what that experience is like for somebody that, I mean, whether that be a person that has experienced a sexual assault or has not? What's it like working with a therapist for the first few times?
It's kind of awkward because you're just sitting there, supposed to talk about your life, and I thought it had to be this one thing in my mind, like, oh, I don't know. You're just trying to get to know your therapist at first. My therapist was just trying to get to know me. I wish I knew that. And it's a comfortable, safe place. And with immense help. And so at first, I think I was trying too hard to just use that to instantly heal myself. And like, she would just like solve my problem instantly. And that's not true.
It didn't work that way?
No. Not solve my problems myself. She gave me a whole bunch of help to solve my problems. EMDR, tapping is a grounding technique I mentioned earlier. Feeling anxious at that club fair, and I went out and I learned some grounding techniques from her, and I used those. So I've also read some very helpful books that she recommended, and like at first, I think I saw her every week. And regular visits are really, really important. Some days you're going to have great therapy sessions, and some days you're going to walk away being like, well, that didn't help at all. And that's okay.
Were you connected with this therapist through campus, or was this something that you pursued on your own?
This was something I pursued on my own.
Okay, because I'm just wondering, like, we have a lot of college students that listen, if like therapy is accessible on campus, or if that's not the case, or how to go about that route as well.
Yeah. Most colleges have therapists on site. I think you get 5 free sessions a semester or a year. I don't know the numbers since that's
okay.
They also have group therapy sessions.
So group work.
Free ways to get therapy, and I highly recommend taking advantage of those. Even if you're not, if you don't think you're suffering through anything, therapy is just important no matter what.
It's a privilege to have therapy. On campus, do you feel like students are open to seeking therapy and talking about having a therapist, or is there still a lot of stigma surrounding that?
I think my generation, for the most part, is super open about having therapists. Someone will be like, oh, my therapist is calling me right now, and it's not like weird at all to be like, oh, your therapist is calling me. It's just like, oh, of course. Like, pretty much all of my friends have therapists, whether it's at the college, using those resources, or ones that are on their plan. But I think I'm lucky to be surrounded by friends that are so encouraging of having a therapist. I know other generations and other circles don't. But just, I mean, a therapist is just someone who you can like say whatever you want to. And it's kind of your world in there. And they don't have any opinions about you. And so there shouldn't be a stigma. Or if you think, or if there is one, like you don't have to talk about having a therapist either if that's not what you're into. I think just having one on your own for yourself is really important too.
Do you ever go into therapy like thinking you're going to talk about one thing and walking out and it's not at all what you ended up talking about?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like maybe something will bug me and I go in and I say, oh, this thing just really, really bugged me. My therapist is so great about getting to like the bottom of what's happening. Like it's just like this deep dive and like look backwards in time at maybe the reactions that I have and why I have those reactions, the feelings that I have, why I have triggers. It's very interpersonal look at things I don't think I could ever just come up with on my own. I just need that gentle nudge to be like, this is why you're feeling what you're feeling. And it's really important so that I know that I'm not just in this weird state of mind. It's like, no, I feel this way for a reason. And it's important to know that, to work through it.
I like your language, a gentle nudge.
Yeah.
Often we all need a gentle nudge in a lot of different areas, and the people we surround ourselves help us give us that, but sometimes a professional is certainly super helpful. What advice would you give to a young person or just a person in general who has been assaulted from maybe even by someone that they know?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. So whether you know it, let's say someone was just assaulted and personally they want to seek help. I think the first step is talking to someone, because then it brings it outside of your head and you can realize what's going on. My friend that I called up didn't tell me like exactly what happened to me. She just told me, you should take these next steps. And I wouldn't have done that if I didn't hear that. That was just very helpful advice that I needed to hear at the time. And so you don't even have to tell anyone exactly what's going on, just saying like something bad happened. I think I need help. And maybe that person will be like, oh, okay, well, these are your resources. And I think I was lucky to have someone to talk to, but even just, I think a friend that maybe you know has been through a similar experience is a safe person to call. But then let's say you realize your friend may not be acting the same after something happened. You don't just want to be like, hey, I know this thing happened to you. Like, you should tell me about it. You should just say like, how can I support you at the moment? Create that safe place and open environment to talking. They can say whatever they want to say to you. They don't have to say exactly what happened, just their thoughts and feelings. And as that person going to your friend that you've noticed is not acting the same, you can point them in the right direction. You're not going to have the right answers, which I think is hard as a friend too, that you can't just solve their problems. I feel that way a lot of times.
It's super important in suicide prevention as well. You like totally name two things. You notice something, you noticed a change in a friend. So that maybe is a gateway to ask or let the person know, make an I statement. Hey, I've noticed, you know, this, you've done this, or you're doing this differently. But also you don't have to be the one to fix it just because you've noticed.
Yeah. And I think it's super important to check in on your friends. Like if you do notice that thing, that's not something you just brush under the rug. You have that conversation to say, how are you? Simple as that. Just how are you? And maybe they'll be responsive to that and let you know what's going on. Maybe they just wanted to know that somebody noticed that you're feeling different. Yeah.
It can be that simple. It's so hard. I don't know. I think this is kind of an interesting question that was presented. There's a common misconception that sexual assault is the result of what people are wearing. I'd say that probably applies to women more than men. How do you debunk this belief?
I just want to like scream out like that's not true. Like that's just not what happens. I mean, this goes back to similar with when alcohol is involved. Like your actions like are not your fault for what happened to you. Like it is what happened to you is that person's personal choices that they made. That has absolutely nothing to do with you. Like I mean, I was wearing like a normal outfit, but like I threw those clothes away. Like I never wanted to see them again. I thought like they made me look a certain way or this or that. Yeah, I hate that misconception that because it just blames the victim, and that's not true at all. It's never ever the victim.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I just have to take a little bit of a breath talking. That's hard to hear as a mom that cares about young people and cares about just, I don't know, nobody should be taken advantage of. No consent. It's not your fault. You weren't wearing the wrong thing. You didn't consume the wrong thing. It wasn't your actions. It was the other person's actions.
Yeah.
Sarah, this has been super, super helpful from somebody, like I said, that just, I don't have a ton of experience with this, but I do feel like, just like Mountain in My Mind, like there's so many topics that we need to be talking about. That was such a great film. It was so powerful. Really, really highly recommend to our listeners to take a look and watch that film. We end all of our podcasts with the same question, and you may answer this in any way that you would like. So here it is. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What does the world need to hear right now?
Somebody loves you. The world loves you. It's a very forgiving place. Sometimes you got to go out and look for it, but it's there.
Awesome. The world is a forgiving place. Aren't we grateful for that? And self-love, along with that other person and those other people that love you, can make the world a better place for all of us. Thank you, Sarah, so much for your time today as a college student. I know you're busy and working hard, but thanks for joining me today on Hopeful Conversation. Be sure to tune into our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on. Pain ends.